if I want to choke somebody, number one of the landmarks I'll look for, and there's multiple ways to do this, but one that's the most simple I would say is make sure my elbow is directly under the chin, because really what I'm trying to do here is pinch the arteries right here, the carotid arteries, right?
Yep.
I want to get here. And then the other key is when you do this strangle, if your chin is down, right? So say your chin's down, look, I'm going to start at your earlobe here and I'm going to work it across like that, right? And and if you haven't been in this position, this is already probably not comfortable. The other detail here with the arm, and again that gets missed sometimes, is if you're too tense, it actually is going to create space, and space is the enemy of what I'm trying to do. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to actually just wrap very relaxed like a belt. And already just right there, you probably already feel, right?
Yeah.
Just with one arm. I haven't even connected, right? And the next thing I would actually, if I was wrapped around you and stuff, I would be constricting like a snake. But we'll just look at the arms here. Now this comes in. Now a mistake people make is they'll stick this arm out and then you can grab this and control this. And yeah, now I'm dealing with this, right? But I could always come here and finish. So actually what I want to do is punch this behind. And really what's happening with this arm is it's just pushing my wrist here into this, right?
Yep.
And my biceps are doing the work here. And then I just come in here like this and I would bring my head in really nice and tight. And I would just slow, steady squeeze. Start right here and then right there. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, I probably got to about a 2 there.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was because I really wrapped it. Now, if I get in here, you can feel the space there, right? You're fine, right? Now, when I wrap, feel the difference? You see right there. Okay.
Sure do.
And one of the big things, I guess we probably sit back up,
Oof.
is
Well,
you feel your eyes and stuff.
Oh
water,
yeah, you feel the pressure in your eyes, kind of like
So that's
building up. But
that's a proper strangle. One other thing I would just add is, if you ever are in a situation you have to choke somebody, don't go right to 10.
yeah,
Because if you go right to 10, you're going to go to 9, 8, 7, and you're going to give the other person hope.
fatigue a little bit.
And when you're trying to strangle somebody, hope is not what you want to give them.
Yes.
You want to actually go the other way. I want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, up, up, up.
Slowly.
And then slowly,
That makes sense.
and then that's how that will happen.
What's your what degree belt are you, John?
I'm now a 2nd-degree black belt.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's like in the gi. People. There's a lot of there's some mythology around the belts in jiu-jitsu for sure, right? I'll be the first to tell you. But generally speaking, I would say Brazilian jiu-jitsu does a good job in the sense that if you're going with a black belt, you kind of know, right?
Yeah.
There should be a difference. Now that said, that doesn't mean like a blue or purple belt can't go in and beat somebody. And some of it is marketing for sure.
Yeah.
But I think much better than the other traditional martial arts, right? Jiu-jitsu does a really good job from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Of kind of weeding some of that out. And that's because it's a live martial art. I mean, you get to do it 100% with somebody, and we're not worried about, whereas like with striking, if you came in, and we were going to spar, I'm not trying to knock you out. That'd be a terrible friend,
right. For sure. All right. Well, with that, what's up, everyone? Welcome. Art of Wellness, episode 2. I'm Dr. Gerry, Doctor of Physical Therapy. I'm here with John Brooks. What's up, John?
Hey, how's it going?
You want to tell everybody all the letters you have after your name,
yeah.
all that certification stuff?
So we could... Sure. Well, just a quick background. So I have a Master of Science in Nutrition and Wellness. And I generally specialize help people lose body fat. That's the number one thing people come to me for, but just other specific goals. I work with all populations, from elite athletes to everyday people. You'd be surprised, it's a lot of the advice is very similar. And then from a training standpoint, I'm a certified functional strength coach, and then I have a bunch of other credentials and stuff in that area. But that's more or less my background. I work with people in person and online.
How did we meet again? I'm trying to remember how we met.
How did we meet?
Did I email you?
I think you might have reached out, I think, and then and it might have been through the nutrition business or through the jiu-jitsu.
I think I Googled like nutrition something services, and then you came up. I think I just called you after that and left a message. But...
Yeah, that sounds about right, right? Yeah. So that's my background. That's what I do. And it's fun, you get to really help people, like you, right? Like just as an example, my wife, she works in medicine, and for a long time she worked in the ER, and she liked parts of it, but she would be like, I don't know if I'm making people better. You know what I mean? And when you work with people, help them with, truly change their life through like, building good habits through weight loss, and then, adopting a good strength training protocol that they can sustain. That's pretty rewarding. For sure.
When you first get a client, what's I guess starting from ground zero, what's the first thing you start with somebody?
Sure. Yeah. So I have like a form that kind of gives me some basic information on my
Yeah.
site, right? So people, they Google me, they find me, through reviews and things like that. And they spend about 5 minutes at most filling out this form. And then I reach out to them. We just do a consultation call.
Yeah.
And I just spend 15 minutes talking to people about, hey, what are your goals? And a big thing I like to talk about with them too is like, what are some past barriers that you hit where
Yes.
maybe I can make a difference, right? And often with diet is the big thing that I find is trying to stick to some kind of a fad diet, which involves some kind of unnecessary food avoidance. And this is not to, say if somebody's had success with it, I'm happy for people, right?
Yeah.
It's just that I've done this a long time. And
Hmm.
generally speaking, they're doing things that are not sustainable and also
Yep.
unnecessary, right? Every diet,
Yes.
if the goal is fat loss, is tricking you into some kind of an energy deficit for the most part, right? And again,
Yeah.
the rules can sometimes, depending upon which one, can be a little bit too rigid, and they're not necessarily grounded in evidence, right? That's how I would
Yes.
state that.
Okay. When you say not sustainable, like what are some things that people, I guess the most common things people do that you feel are not sustainable in their
Sure.
diet?
I'd say the most popular right now, it's fading a little bit, would be say like keto, just
Okay.
this unnecessary avoidance of carbs, right? There's this belief that carbs are uniquely fattening because there's the carb insulin theory model, which has never really been proven, right? Oh, I eat carbs, my insulin goes up, and then I can't burn fat, right? It's
Yep.
like, okay, let's break this down. First of all, insulin doesn't have any calories in and of itself, and the levels of it are commensurate to how much carbohydrate you consume.
Hmm.
So you can overconsume anything, but the truth is, and just kind of the way I explain to people is, why do people succeed kind of in the short term with keto? And by the way, if you prefer low carb and that's just where your palate is, you could do totally fine, have a total good diet. So I'm not like anti that. I
Yeah.
just want people to know like that's not the only way. But really, what's happening there is we're just tricking people into a protein rich diet because
Okay.
there's carbs, protein, and fat.
Hmm.
If I tell you you can't have one of the three, by default, you're going to eat more of the other two, right?
Yes.
And a protein rich diet we know is beneficial, especially if you're trying to stay full, because protein's the most satiating macronutrient. And then just from a body composition standpoint, there's some favorable outcomes that can happen there. So it's generally hard to overeat protein.
Yep.
But what I say to people is you don't have to eliminate carbohydrates to eat more protein. You could just eat more protein.
Yeah.
And if you really zoom out, your problem isn't apples, bananas, oatmeal. I mean, that's people. I've never had somebody call me and say, John, I eat way too many bananas and apples and oatmeal and things like
Hmm.
that. So people are saying often, okay, well, so John, what are you saying is the problem, right? Um, if I were to zoom out, right? And this is where I'll appeal to nature here for a second,
Okay.
and which is generally a fallacy, right? Because if you and I got bit by a king cobra snake or a pit viper, it's non-GMO, organic, natural, and deadly. So point is, just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good, and just because
Right.
it's artificial doesn't mean it's bad.
Yes.
But when we do look at nature and we look at foods that do come from nature, the validity of this point is that we have not encountered certain foods until we started processing things. And there's one combination of macronutrients that really doesn't exist in nature, and that's carbs and fat together.
Mm.
There's nothing like a donut from nature that is both sweet and savory, where
Okay.
you have something that's very sweet, sugary, and then savory, right?
Hmm.
So I would argue that our problem is largely foods that are rich in both carbs and fat together. And that's
Okay.
going to be chips, pizza, cookies,
Yeah.
ice cream, cakes, things like that. But somehow carbs have
The
gotten
good
all the
stuff.
blame,
Right.
right? Carbs have gotten the blame, right? So they're doing keto and they eat
Yep.
chips and they say, I don't eat chips, John, I'm on keto. And I'll say, well, if you turn the bag over, there's more calories that come from fat because they don't cook them in water. They cook them in oil,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
And this isn't a critique on necessarily fat either, just to be clear. There's like great nutrient dense fat rich foods. My point is when carbs and fat are together in one food, our brains don't know how to handle the satiety from it. It's very easy to
Okay.
overeat those foods. And that's because we never encountered those foods until we started processing them, right? But again, carbs have kind of taken the lion's share of the blame. And it's like, and
Right.
especially if you want to perform in an athletic setting,
Yep.
look, if you're at the Olympics, your friend's Facebook diet is out the window. We need to win. And guess what? If it's anything involving high intensity, you need carbohydrates or
Yeah.
you'll lose.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. What's the primary population you work with? Just general
Yeah,
population
yeah, I would
or
say
okay.
generally population, just
Okay.
everyday adults. And I'll have people that have been overweight their whole lives, right? And I think the big thing I try to ask them is, have you ever envisioned yourself as being lean or something? Because you'll
Yep.
define yourself by that,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of people on the outside will look at that and say, "Oh, that person's just lazy," and they just are whatever. And it's like the truth is there's genetic factors that play a role.
Yeah.
There just is. It's not
Right.
the same experience for everybody.
Right.
Just like if we all lined up and ran 100 meters, some kids are just naturally fast. You
Hmm.
can't teach speed. You can maximize your ability, but
Yep.
and it's the same here. and it's not that these people can't succeed. They can for sure. It's just that, calling them lazy and all this and that, it's like that really doesn't help.
Hmm.
What really helps is addressing kind of the underlying issue. And some of it is from just, yeah, of course, poor habits and things like that,
Right.
which generally, we change what we can change. And,
Hmm.
you're dealt the cards you're dealt, but we can make it work.
Yes. All right. You mentioned keto. What's another diet you see out there that's pretty prevalent? We're gonna ruffle some feathers here a little
Sure.
bit. Sounds
Yeah,
like.
and people do get really mad about
Right.
diet stuff, and I just want to be clear because it's like I'm attacking them. I'm
Right.
really not, because if you're succeeding with something and you feel good in your health, by all
Exactly.
means do it. Like,
Hmm.
great. I just have done this a long time, and what I find is most people don't sustain it, and the data backs that up, especially with like keto as an example.
Yep.
But again, you can gravitate from keto to maybe like a lower carb type thing,
Yep.
right? Where you're,
Hmm.
and when I say keto, I mean like less than 50 grams of carbs per day is generally considered keto, but
Yeah.
maybe you eat less than 100 or 150 depending upon your activity level, and that suits you well.
Yep.
That's okay. That's much more sustainable,
Hmm.
in my opinion. So again, a lot of what you're doing is perfectly fine with a lot of these diets too. That's kind of the trick of them, right? It's like, oh, they said this and that's true. It's like, yeah, that's anything, right?
Hmm.
If you're going to convince people, you're going to highlight the things that are true and stuff,
Yeah.
but you're not going to deal with all the other stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's the extreme of that is carnivore now, where people only eat
Okay.
meat and stuff like that, right? Like
Yeah.
that's another one, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of influencer type people. And here's the thing that I find pervasive about it is that it gets tied in with other cultural issues. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like politics and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. I
Where
see.
if you do this, this person's a soy boy. This, and some of it's fine. I mean, I don't care. I might even agree with some of the people on some of those issues and stuff like that. But then turn that
Hmm.
into food, and now you're some kind of expert on food, and you're telling people only consume meat. And the problem just generally with dietary advice and why you can get away with having really shitty, I would say, diet advice and
Hmm.
generally not be held accountable for it, is that the effects of food are generally long term and varied. Whereas with pharmaceuticals, if somebody gives you the wrong drug, you can kill somebody pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
So the food kind of lends itself to that, and then also everyone eats, so therefore they're qualified to give advice, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but there's great, like, your grandma was probably right when she tell you to color your plate and, have
Yeah.
lots of different stuff. So there's some of that old wisdom that's what's great. Like, I'm happy to. So I'm not saying you have to have like credentials to give advice, just to be clear, because some of the
Right.
dumbest shit I hear are from people with, very impressive credentials. And some of the best stuff I hear are from people who have no credentials, right? On specifically nutrition, right? But
Yes.
that's why we get a lot of this stuff, I think, with
Hmm.
food particularly, and myths. And then people are desperate. They just want to try something because they've failed, with a lot of other stuff, because it's not easy to make habit changes. But that's why you got to meet people where they're at and kind of slide them down the continuum.
What is some of the, on social media, like you said, there's a lot of people, everybody's an expert on everything
Sure.
nowadays now, and you could just post it and, that person, just because they have a zillion followers, all of a sudden they're, you know, diet experts. So what's
Sure.
what's some of the, I guess recently that you've seen online or on social media, some of the, like you said, bull crap stuff that you feel really shouldn't even be out there?
One was going around recently, and I get it a lot because clients send it to me because I had one with like oatmeal as peasant food. That was one that was
Oh,
going
I don't
around.
think I saw that one.
Yeah, that it was from one of those carnivore doctors. It was just total grifter.
Carnivore
Total
doctors.
grifter. Give me a break. And it's again long term. Let's see what your colon health is. And oh, by the way, just because one person can get away with it, they might be gifted. You know what I mean? They might just be genetically gifted, and it doesn't mean they're maximizing their potential. Just to be
Right.
clear, but for most people, it's awful advice. Like,
Yeah.
don't eat fruit and vegetables. It's like, okay.
Why were they saying don't eat that? Like, what was the rationale
The-
behind that?
They'll so generally speaking, you'll hear a couple reasons. One would be like with cognitive stuff, right? Helps fix some of that. And there's truth, like a lot of the keto research is actually done through
I've
psychology.
heard
So
that.
so
Yep.
some people's
Hmm.
glucose machinery in the brain is kind of, it doesn't work well, so they do respond well to low carb, right?
Yep.
But again, you could still kind of do that and still eat vegetables and stuff.
Yes.
I so here's why I think people will do, say, a carnivore type diet and kind of feel good. I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of them have a sensitivity to what are called FODMAPs, which are fermentable carbohydrates, and they just kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater because
Mm.
they're only eating protein, and then they just start to feel better. It's hard to overeat protein, so therefore, you end up in some kind of an energy deficit, so you're
Yep.
losing body
And they get
fat,
leaner. Yeah.
and you're getting protein. So
Yep.
if you're strength training, you can help.
Yep.
So again, those would be, say, the positives that would
Hmm.
come into play. And then in it, a lot of it too will be based on, if you, I'm sure people remember a really big diet, probably, I say 10 years or more ago, it probably hit its peak. Even more was the paleo type diet
Okay,
stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Hmm.
Which again, a lot of it is valid and true, but it's again, there's unnecessary food avoidance, right? Like, hey,
Hmm.
don't eat grains and things because they have phytates and things like that. But meanwhile, they're telling you to eat a bunch of nuts, which are
Yep.
also loaded in. So it's like a total contradiction. So it doesn't make sense. It's because it's always a story, a narrative, because narratives are powerful. So like the way the
Yeah.
plants protect themselves if they poison you and stuff like that. And I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, just to be clear either, because somebody's probably
Yeah.
thinking, "Oh, listen to this soy boy." It's like, no, I'm not. I eat animal protein, but that doesn't mean that plants are bad for you and stuff. It's so absurd
Right.
because it's just countered all the evidence and stuff. But typically, it's some kind of a narrative like that, like. This is how the plants protect. Like if you're a prey, you can run away, but the plants have these chemicals that they poison you with, and then they are oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? But they just basically inhibit the absorption of nutrients, right?
Yep.
It's like, well, you're not supposed to absorb 100% of all your nutrients, right? Like
Hmm.
fiber kind of inhibits, but who's to say you need to absorb 100% of things, right? So
Yeah.
that's where nature
Yeah.
probably has this right.
Yeah.
So that would be like another example. But again, it's always around usually some kind of a story to kind of make it really stick because it's enticing. I remember when I was reading some of it, I was buying some of it before I got more informed. This is going back a long time. It's like, wow, that's really true. It's like, that makes sense. They're out to get you, this and
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And again, there's going to be examples of that stuff that's absolutely true. The establishment medical thing, if talking about political, but like 20, they lost a ton of credibility. They
Hmm.
deserve to be questioned in many ways because of how they behaved with certain stuff and covering stuff up and things like that. And just terrible, right? And
Hmm.
very much so consensus science, right? Like I'm a
Hmm.
big fan of Michael Crichton. And Michael Crichton always said if it's consensus, it isn't science, because it's not a
Hmm.
popularity contest. It's
Yep.
one person with a theory. What does the evidence say?
Yep.
That's what that is. If it's a consensus of scientists agree on something, that's politics. That's not science. Sorry.
Okay.
So I don't like consensus in my science.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm trying to think of other topics that I've seen on social media or, different people saying some wild stuff. Oh man, there was one right in my head. I just lost it. Like, seed oils.
Yeah,
Have you seen this
yeah,
stuff?
the seed oil
What
one's
do you
really
think about
interesting
that?
too because there's a lot of really smart people who have fallen for it, and it's not new. Again, it was something I remember reading back over 15 years ago.
Really?
Yes, for sure. It's
Okay.
not new. It's 100% not new.
Okay.
It's new to the big kind of out in the ether and stuff like that, I would say. And I'll explain this all from start to finish so everyone understands kind of where it kind of comes from and stuff. So, and it's a lot of really smart people who I respect in other areas, like really believe it. And it's always like, and that's the hard thing
That's
too
the
with this
hard
stuff,
part.
right? It's
I
like things
know.
are not black and white, things are shaded gray. I'm sure
Exactly.
there are topics that I have talked about that I am not kind of informed on that I have probably somebody who is informed on probably is like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Fair enough. Probably, right? So humility is always helpful because as we
Yes.
talked, before we even spoke was, all scientific conclusions are inductive, which means we leave open the possibility they should later be proven. They can later be proven
Mm-hmm.
wrong, right? You can't just be like, this is always going to be the case. It's like,
That's
that's not
science.
science,
Yep.
right? Science
Exactly.
is it'll later be proven wrong, right? It could be. We've
Most
had
of
that
the
seen that
time.
many times.
Mm-hmm.
But with the seed oil thing, so kind of going back in the day, if you looked at like French fries and chips and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
these should be made in things like beef tallow, right? And the idea is that, well, that's better for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening was it got switched because of the American Heart Association and other organizations came in and said, well, actually, from a cardiovascular standpoint, you'd be better off using these seed oils because there's polyunsaturated fats, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's saturated fat more or less, but versus polyunsaturated
Yes.
fat.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say in the 80s and stuff like that, they went too far with demonizing saturated fat for sure, where it was like, oh, it's all bad. It was basically at any dose somehow it's bad or a very low dose. It's like
Mm-hmm.
no, different populations can tolerate it differently, right?
Yeah.
I might get this wrong, but there's something called like the PCSK9 gene, right? Certain people have this gene, and it means that they can basically eat more or less what they want. And I'm trying to think if the gene is turned off or on, but basically their cholesterol won't rise, their LDL cholesterol and all that kind of stuff. And they can just do what they want. And that's how the new therapies work, right? Outside of statins, if you want to lower cholesterol, there's PCSK9 inhibitors and stuff like that that are actually
Yep.
really effective. I'm not a cardiologist. I'm just, telling you what I know
Yep.
about that part. But anyway, it goes back to that and a lot of these studies that were poorly done. Where it was like, for instance, it was like the nurses study where it was like red meat is bad for people. And it was just a blanket statement like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, well, at the time you were telling people, say, red meat is bad for you. And then as a result, Who's not going to consume red meat? Well, people who probably have otherwise good habits, right? They're probably exercising, they probably don't smoke, they don't drink, right? But when you tease that stuff out, that kind of correlation kind of deviates, right? Because otherwise, healthy people are going to more or less take that advice because they're paying attention to their health. But
Hmm.
so anyway, that's kind of where that started, was this demonization of saturated fats. So then they started to do a lot of the seed oils and put that
Yeah.
in processed foods, right?
Hmm.
French fries, your chips, your cakes and cookies and things like that. So the idea is, if you're consuming a lot of these things, it's really bad. And I would say, yes. But if you were to cook your French fries and your chips and all your cakes and cookies and beef tallow, it's still bad.
Yeah.
And arguably, yeah, there's some truth from a cardiovascular standpoint. It's worse. It's all bad. You should not be consuming a lot of these foods. So this idea that it's just the seed oils are just the worst thing. It's like, if you're eating a lot of seed oils, you're probably eating a lot of processed foods.
Hmm.
But the seed oil in and of itself, outside of, I say corn oil does have some pretty nasty evidence, like over consuming that for sure is probably a
Okay.
problem.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I don't think it's the toxic mess people think it is. That said, if I'm making a salad dressing, I use olive oil. I would prefer a monounsaturated fat. And the polyunsaturated fats, the idea is that they're much, and it's true, they're much more subject to like being rancid due to like heat and light and things like that, because they're polyunsaturated. They're much less stable.
Yep.
But again, people go too far with that. If your French fries were in beef tallow at McDonald's, you're still, if you're overeating French fries,
Of course.
it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not an absolutist either. I don't tell people you can never have any of these things. Even when I work with clients, and say, let's try and get that to like 10 to 20% of what you
That was my
consume.
next question. Okay.
Yeah, if you're at least 80%, and assuming that you're, let's say you're in energy balance and you're a normal weight person, you're probably fine. If you're trying to lose weight, even still, like 80, 90% nutrient dense within the context of, say, your macronutrient targets, your goals, um, totally fine. And it actually does well from a long-term standpoint, because you're not going to have any nutrient deficiency. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't be mainlining any of this stuff anyway. So my larger pointer is, whether it's cooked in beef tallow or seed oils, and you're eating a lot of this stuff, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Overconsumption.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, it gets weaved into the weave. It gets weaved into, you know about the weave. It's funny, right?
Yeah.
I'll bring it right back. But no, it's, but it gets tied into other stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, we need to separate that kind of thing, right?
Gotcha.
Like, if you're more libertarian leaning, right? And you read some of
Mhm.
those kind of like economists and stuff. Like, I love Austrian economics and stuff like that, but then it's got weaved in with seed oils and stuff. And it's like,
Oh.
oh, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Nah. And it's like, and these are really smart people on those topics. And that's where I think some of the offense gets in, because it's like, oh, look at this guy. He must be a soy boy. He's talking about this stuff. It's like,
So weird.
come on. No. Like, we need to separate things out. And this is where I don't get mad at the people who kind of fall for it, because it's very enticing. And if I didn't have this background, I could see how I would definitely be right there with them.
Right.
So I just want to make clear on that.
Mhm.
But when you kind of know it, it's like, ugh. So the people that are leading it and using it to build their audiences and doing this stuff,
Yeah.
they're the ones I blame. And they're either stupid or lying. That's what I would say for them.
Yeah, just trying to sell something. But so seed oils, I'm trying to think of other kind of flashy social media nutrition stuff I see. I guess I don't know if this is
Well,
more.
there's the plant-based side too, by the way. The
Oh, no,
vegans,
yeah,
the
yeah.
vegans do stuff too. Just
Okay.
to be clear, I think they
You want to go after them or?
well, sure, why not? They're ripe for a target. Because if your thing is, so to all my vegan friends out there, if your thing is that it's just a moral thing and you don't want to harm animals and stuff like that, totally fine.
Yeah.
I am not in the business of convincing people of moral stuff, because there's actually a really good case to be made there. I get it, right? Totally fair enough. Factory farming, I mean, it could be really bad and gross, and I've seen some of that. And hopefully, this is where the people need to understand the difference between the lab meats and the 3D printing and stuff like that. This is actually an important topic, because this is
Okay.
going to become really important, I'd say, in the next 10 years.
Yeah. Sure. I don't
So
even know what this
yeah,
is. Yeah.
so like the plant-based meats, like the Beyond Meat and stuff like
Oh,
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
They're disgusting, right? They're just processed nonsense, right? But if you're a vegan and you want a little taste of it, or vegetarian, fine, fair enough. But it's not like that's like some healthy alternative. It's just not. But if we can 3D print, say, chicken breasts or eggs and things like that, because once we
wow.
have the
Okay.
DNA, once we have the genetic code, it is literally the exact same thing. There is no
Yeah.
difference. And I understand, as I say this, how people are going to be like, well, wait a minute. That sounds
Mhm.
crazy. That sounds creepy. I get it. I really do. But if you just down to the molecule, you will not be able to tell any bit of a difference.
Yeah.
Because the DNA, that's the genetic information that tells, how to translate and transcript and make the protein, right? If we know how to do that and we can make it, and then we don't have to like kill all these animals
That's
and deal with the
wild.
factory
Yeah.
farming, that's really
That's
good. And also
crazy.
too, from a cost basis and things like
Mhm.
that. And all of that kind of stuff. I think it's really good. And look, there's always going to be a market for some of the animal stuff, but maybe it could be done in a much better manner. You know what I mean? Like you talk to hunters and stuff, they're actually some of the best conservationists. You know, like
Mm,
they do a really good job with some of that
hmm.
stuff. You know, again, if you're vegan, you're probably pissed that I said that, but it's true. It's better than the factory farming and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you could be perfectly healthy without being a vegan. I think sometimes they go
Yeah.
very far with like, this is the only way. And it's like, no, and a lot of it
Right.
too is becomes this. Let's say you became a vegan a year and a half ago, and you're feeling way better, and you're doing well. It's well, what were you doing before? And you're like, John, I was at Wendy's 3 times a day. I was like, well, no kidding, you feel better. It's compared to what? What were you doing before, right? So it's the old Thomas Sowell thing, right? Compared to what? At what cost? What evidence do you have? If you
Hmm.
ask those 3 questions
Yep.
in any of this stuff, I think you're generally going to come to a good answer. So like for you, I would say, well, what were you doing before, right? And it's
Yep.
like, do you think if Jerry was eating all the vegetables and fruit he's eating now, and the nuts and seeds and all that, and then he had a piece of salmon and a couple eggs, all of a sudden he's unhealthy? I would argue he'd be healthier in many ways.
Yeah.
So
It's gonna be hard to talk about nutrition without feeling like we're coming after some people, but we're not. I mean, always like, I mean, you said it yourself, and we say it all the time. I say it to patients all the time. The answer is always somewhere in the middle, and
yeah,
consistency always beats, whatever flashy diet or flashy rehab thing you see online. Um, Consistency and individualizing it to the client
yeah,
is always best. Even me saying always is kind of like I'm not trying
sure,
to be absolute as well, but
sure,
as long as you could customize it to the person you're helping. For me, it's a physical therapy patient in pain with knee pain, back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, whatever pain. For John, it's somebody that they need nutrition help with. You have to customize it to them, and sometimes being or looking online and seeing all these like basic templates, protocols, it might not help you. So it's always best to maybe seek someone out in your community that you trust, a physical therapist, nutritionist that can customize the plan to you. But yeah,
yeah, I agree. Consistency is a superpower.
yeah,
And to your point too, like with the modern economy, we have, experts in an area or something like that. And even the word expert's now loaded,
right,
but
yeah,
just people who can help you, right? And it's not a life sentence. Like I always tell clients, like, we work together for a couple months and then, hopefully I've helped save you money, save you time, whether it's supplements or things like that. Like, hey, what can I really do that helps me and stuff like that. But I try to explain this as well as I can without somebody just if you're getting into your feelings and we're talking about science, then it's a problem because
yeah,
I invite being challenged. I always
hmm,
ask clients because I don't want to be wrong.
same, yeah,
I don't want
yeah,
to be wrong. You know what I mean? And like to your point with like a training protocol,
hmm,
right? Like it's the body's pretty complex, right? So
very
it's like,
complex,
you know, are there general problems that you're going to, yeah, we're going to see a lot of people are concave, they're rolled
yeah,
forward and stuff. So there's going to be some stuff, some
yeah,
general advice that's very good, but they might be dealing with something very specific that
hmm,
they might be exacerbating by doing something. Never mind some of the silly stuff that we'll see in fitness online
right,
too, right? Where
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, look, so and so is doing. Yeah, he's 25 and very gifted athlete and this and that. Like
yeah,
having grandma do super high box jumps like a
right,
parlor trick.
hmm,
That's probably not the best idea. Or
right,
loading her spine with a back squat. Like
right.
probably not the best idea.
Yeah, we talked over the phone too. Like, if someone walks into my clinic or whatever, and they're like, "Hey, I have back pain. What should I do? What are the top 5 things I should do?" It's hard to explain that fast to somebody. You have to
Sure,
assess them. You have to like again customize everything to them. And again, pain in the human body is so complex. It's not just do these 3 exercises, you'll be fine. Someone has to actually look at you and assess you. Same thing with their diet plan, nutrition. You have to break down their habits, their lifestyle. I mean, I
sure,
do the same thing on the physical therapy standpoint where again, we had Danny on in the last podcast. He was saying like he has pain with flexion with his back pain. Well, he's sitting a lot and he's playing chess a lot, sitting on the toilet, all that stuff. So, you know, those habits go a long way. So we have to kind of deconstruct your lifestyle habits first and then kind of go from there. And obviously with me, a full physical therapy assessment, and then with you as well, a full assessment with their habits and what they're eating, what they're not eating, all that
sure.
stuff. You have to customize it is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I use the functional movement screen, like the Gray
Yes,
Cook.
the
Like that's
FMS
what I
stuff.
do if
Yeah.
I'm working with somebody in person. because I think it's a really good
Mm-hmm.
tool. It's a general tool
General,
that
but
allows you to
yeah.
make specific recommendations
Mm-hmm.
that I think is really good. They use it at the NFL Combine, I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Because some of the most worst offenders, interestingly, of some of this stuff is like great athletes. Like
Yep.
great athletes, he's got a strong lower back. That's not a compliment. He's not
Mm-hmm.
using his glutes and hamstrings properly, and he's
Mm-hmm.
getting away with it because he's such a freak.
Yeah.
But we can make him way better,
Yeah.
like, or she, right? You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? I'm sure you've seen
For
that, right?
sure. Yep.
So sometimes we'll see stuff like that, and we can fix that. Because then in the long term, even for that great athlete, now they can prolong their career and do better, like that kind of thing.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting because it's the same sort of thing. Like with food, often a lot of it's plug and play. Like if you go to a gastroenterologist and you're having just general GI stuff, it's not. I know it ranks well on Google. Like I can write an article, top 5 this or that,
I
right?
know.
But
Yeah.
I do it, and it's like
It's
yeah,
very
I'm
enticing.
yeah, and you still write stuff, and it's just good advice, but it's always okay. Now there's gonna be specific things. So GI stuff, people tracking their food, for instance, keeping notes, like that's really helpful. Because we can plug and play. It used to be complete elimination was like a common thing, and now it's, well, no, let's kind of do it piece by piece, right? But we know there's certain offenders within food categories that tend to give people, like I mentioned, FODMAPs, more fermentable carbohydrates. A lot of people have problems with that, and a lot of what are sometimes people will call allergies are not allergies at all, right? A true food allergy is, it's Mrs. Doubtfire, I poisoned the bastard, and help us on the way, dearie, right? Because his throat is closing up, right? Like that's a true like
It's a
shellfish
throwback
allergy,
right
yeah.
there.
But that's an allergy. If it's I get a little gas, that's not an allergy. That's some kind of an intolerance or something, right?
Yeah.
And intolerances are dose dependent. So, for instance, if somebody's lactose intolerant, how lactose intolerant are you? You might be able to handle a good hard deli cheddar because it's very low in lactose. The more processed the cheese is, the more lactose there's going to be in there. So, if you're doing like ballpark nacho cheese, yeah, that's probably going to give you a lot of problems if you're lactose
Yep.
intolerant, right? So that makes it hard too. Or when do you pass the amount? Like, for instance, I have an issue with raffinose, right, which is common in cruciferous vegetables, right? So, like,
Okay.
I can eat a lot of broccoli because it's a little bit lower, and if it's cooked, it's gonna be trouble. But like cauliflower rice, if I like
Mm-hmm.
overconsume that, or Brussels sprouts, which I enjoy, I'll be doubled over in pain
Really?
because of the amount. And it's fairly common, right? If anyone's ever been to, like, for instance, Sweet Green, note to Sweet Green, start putting more spinach or a more tolerable lettuce in your bowls, because they put a lot of cabbage in there, for instance, right?
Okay.
So it tastes great and stuff like that. But if you're ever getting like those stomach pains, it's not uncommon. It's probably the raffinose,
Yeah.
as a thing, right? Again, fermentable carbohydrates, like, an example, like, could be like polyols or excess fructose for some people, right? They only have so much of a capacity to handle it. So
Mm-hmm.
certain varieties of apples might give them trouble.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't have apples. It's
Right.
how much.
Yeah.
And I've had, I eat 3 apples and I get this real bad problem. Then we bring them down to 1, no problems.
Yep.
Stuff like that, right?
Yep.
So that's a challenge, right?
Yep.
To try to figure that stuff out. But again, it doesn't mean you can't have any of some of this other stuff.
Yeah.
So,
The same thing in rehab. I mean, like, if I'm rehabbing someone with knee pain or whatever it is, you have to manipulate the variables. Like you said, that person can eat 1 apple and they're fine. Maybe this person can only squat like for 1 set or something, or a split squat, or we find something that they can do and we modify it. You know what I mean?
sure.
But we don't usually take everything out. Sometimes we do, but most of the time it's better to modify and kind of get them slowly build them back up into something else. But
You want them
um,
to getting strong, right?
yes, to getting strong back to their sport or Olympic lifting, whatever they do, get them back to their activity that they love. We talked about like top 5 things or whatever, and it's hard to not, again, to do these things, but
I like that stuff.
I
When I'm
know,
Googling stuff,
and
I'm
it's
like, oh,
hard.
top 5, perfect.
And
Like
I write it in
TLDR.
my newsletter, the PT Handbook. Subscribe, please. But every other week I send out a newsletter, and I think my last one was like, top 3 things to do for a warm up,
Yeah.
for exercise. You know what I mean? So, and at the end, I always kind of like remember, it's better to customize it. So go see your physical therapist, please. You know what I mean? But
Sure.
these are some very general guidelines. But if you're having pain, injury, something specific medically, still go see your physical therapist, please. But yeah, so you mentioned before, people need to find ways to be more consistent with their habits, right?
Yeah, consistency is a superpower.
More
That's for sure.
protein. What else would you kind of throw out there that people need to do
General
more?
rules of thumb: a protein-rich
Yes.
diet,
Hmm.
right? What does that constitute? Look, if you're very lean, you could use total body weight as your guideline. But the old bro recommendation of 1 gram per pound of body weight, if you have really high body fat, so you're 300 pounds,
Uh-huh.
I'm not giving you 300 grams of protein because now you can't have as much carbs and
Yeah.
fat. You're just too pigeonholed. So if you're going to use lean body mass, and it would just, if you're 20% body fat, 0.8 times your body weight.
Okay.
somewhere between like 0.7 to 1.25 grams of protein. So again, there's a continuum where preference can dictate
Yeah.
is where you want to be. Fat, I would say on the low end, like 0.3 grams per pound of, you know, your goal body weight or lean body mass. All the way up to like 0.7 on the high end, I would say. Maybe
Okay.
you could even argue go a little higher than that if that's your preference. And then the rest of your calories you fill in with carbohydrates. There's like I have calculators on my website that do this for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I've
cool.
written articles and stuff. I actually just customized it because I wanted the calculator to work the way I want
Hmm.
with the math, so it's a little bit more specific, right? Where you set the protein, you set the fat, and then the rest can go to carbohydrates, right?
Okay.
But even there's going to be a trade-off between carbs and fat where preference could dictate, right? So I always want people to understand that once you kind of reach your the way I say it is like once you reach your protein, now kind of how much carbs and fat you have really comes down to preference, right? To truly stay in a low fat diet on a high protein while also consuming protein's hard. Because too low of fat for a long period of time could be problematic with the endocrine system and things like that, right?
Yeah.
That's one, but it's not like, hey, dude, I didn't eat fat for 2 days, I'm going to turn into a girl or something. That's not going to happen. I've gotten those messages before, by the way.
Oh
I just
God.
wasn't as strong today. It's like, oh, bros are funny.
Oh
But
yeah. They're the best though.
yeah, exactly. I love it. But there's some of that. It's like that's not how that works. It's much more of a long term thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, protein rich, and generally speaking, honestly, and again, I think I made it clear I'm not a vegan or vegetarian, but generally speaking, people should probably eat more plants for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what's going to kill most people worry about a lot of things killing them. It's probably going to be cardiovascular disease on a long enough time
Yeah.
horizon. And again, so you want to bring up a topic that gets crazy, cholesterol. That is a
Okay.
topic that
Yeah.
has a bunch of grifters and bullshitters on that, and they're going to kill people with their absolutely shitty advice for sure. I'm sorry, because this one I feel strongly about because, look, I get the pharmaceutical industry deserves a ton of flack for sure. There's no doubt about it, right?
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean that it's not. Look, you take one red pill, not the whole bottle, as they say, right? That the red pill is, right? It's
Oh
like the
yeah.
Matrix, kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
You take one red pill, you take the whole bottle, and now your friends are wondering about you, right? So the thing is, it doesn't mean everything is bad and everyone's out to get you and stuff like that. Do some of these companies absolutely behave poorly and try to overprescribe? So absolutely, like, look, we're on the front lines. We're trying to make it.
Yeah, we
I'm
are.
trying to keep people from having to consume a lot of this stuff by
Yes.
diet and exercise. So
Uh-huh.
I have no like incentive to like pump up pharmaceutical companies.
Hmm.
A lot of them are a-holes who made money off people, but it doesn't mean you throw everything out, right?
Exactly.
So there's this idea online that, and this kind of comes from the carnivore community and stuff like that, cholesterol doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your cholesterol is. Your LDL, and it doesn't matter if your LDL cholesterol. So the difference between HDL and LDL cholesterol, just to backtrack, it's all
Yeah.
cholesterol. It's the high density or low density lipoprotein. What's the carrier? If you want to think of it simply, the HDL is considered good because it's returning to your liver to leave your body. The LDL is being sent out to the periphery, which, over time you could think of it as like forming like putty in your arteries, right? And there's
Hmm.
a whole process that happens and it can oxidize and cause atherosclerosis, right? Like if
Right.
you know anyone that's elderly, I mean, this is what is killing people, okay? That's
Yeah.
what happens. It's years and years of bad habits, right? Sometimes they'll get caught earlier with a colon problem or things like that, right? Where the damage happened in the GI tract with poor diet.
Hmm. Hmm.
But cholesterol levels matter. And look no further than your favorite billionaires or just sub billionaires. A lot of them have concierge docs. You know what a lot of them are doing? They're taking like low dose statins and other drugs for longevity purposes. You know what I mean? Like that's what they're doing. And I'm not advocating everyone go on a statin either, because statins have downsides too,
Hmm.
because muscle cramps if you're trying to be active and stuff like
Yep.
that. They say it's like whatever, it's like a low percent of people, I think like
Hmm.
10%. I can tell you anecdotally, a lot of my clients have had problems with them. And that's where I'll bring up like,
Yeah.
well, with diet and exercise, we can affect cholesterol by about 20 to 30%. And for some people, that's enough to get them into the normal range. Awesome. You can also have these new therapies, these PCSK9 inhibitors, stuff like that, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
think some of them are going to be like 2 shots a year and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's going to be those options. That's the pharmaceutical stuff. Diet and exercise about 20 to 30%. So my point with like plants and high fiber is that's a way to lower your cholesterol. The way this works is if you consume more fiber, and generally what you're going to hear is a recommendation for every 1,000 calories, consume at least 10 grams of fiber. So if you're consuming 2,500 calories, you want about 25 grams of fiber. I would go higher than that. I think that's just a
Mm.
low baseline. A
Okay.
real simple way for people to do this, if you're not consuming a lot of fruit and vegetables, at least to start, is just get some psyllium husk fiber. It's super cheap. soluble fiber. If you're not used to it, split your dose. 5 grams in the morning, 5 grams in the afternoon. If you try 10 at once and your gut is not adapted to it,
Yeah.
it's going to not feel good, but it's
Yep.
not insoluble fiber. That's where typically people kind of get like the bubble guts. Soluble fiber is much more easy to tolerate. But what fiber's doing is it's binding up bile. So when you consume fat, you ever drop oil in water? It floats on the top because it's hydrophobic, right? It's afraid of the water,
Yeah.
right? I'm sure you guys heard this in chemistry. Well, in order to digest it, that's what's happening in your stomach. So your body produces bile, which emulsifies it, which basically means it exposes surface area on the fat molecules for lipases, enzymes to digest and break it down.
Mhm.
After bile does its job, it gets recycled. Your body will reabsorb it. But when you consume fiber, bile gets bound up and you excrete it. How does your body make bile? It uses cholesterol. So this is how you lower your cholesterol. That's why on like the oatmeal, it could say heart healthy. Like
Okay.
that's how that works.
Mhm.
So that's where like fiber could be helpful. Also, fiber's satiating, keeps you full, things like that, right? And the last thing you want is your gastroenterologist having to do surgery where he's sewing together your colon because he had to take a foot of it out or something like that. You don't want that. You do not want that. It's going to
Yeah.
affect your life. You have a long GI tract because it's good for nutrient absorption, as well as
Right.
those surgeries. You don't want the stuff in the inner tube getting in the outer tube, right?
Mm.
Sometimes infections and stuff can happen. It can be really
Mhm.
nasty. So, to avoid that, start consuming a more fiber-rich diet, please,
Okay.
please, please. And if you're not going to do it with carbs, that's okay. You could do it with vegetables, like low-carb vegetables. You could do it with almonds and walnuts and Brazil nuts. Those are rich in fiber, things like that too. So,
Okay. You mentioned longevity. There's a
yes,
lot of longevity stuff out there these
yeah.
days. What's some stuff that you're kind of like vibing with?
Yeah, great question. So longevity is a very hard one just because nutrition is just one part of it.
Mhm.
Do you wake up in the morning with a purpose? Do you have low stress? Do you
Yep.
exercise? All of that stuff comes into play with longevity. So what I can tell you is that we do have research on the blue zones of the world where people live the longest and have the lowest rates of middle-age mortality. They have the highest percentage of like
Mhm.
centenarians, people that live one beyond 100. And they do have a lot of these outside of nutrition habits, right? They move naturally every day.
Yep.
So they definitely have movement in their lives. So these are just common factors. And just to be clear, there could be other areas of the world that have this too, that have other things going on. But the
Yep.
commonality between these groups is they move naturally. They wake up
Yeah.
with a purpose. It's low stress from a diet standpoint. Um, all of them except for the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California. There's a sect of them that was specifically studied. They are what we call lacto-ovo vegetarians. They consume, dairy,
Oh, okay.
eggs, things like that.
Yeah.
There are no vegans in these groups, just to be clear. Sorry, it's just true. Um, None of them overeat. I believe all of them consume beans, or at least 4 of the 5. I think all 5 consume coffee, regularly. I think they all consume alcohol lightly. Now, that doesn't mean that alcohol is good for you, because if you look at all the evidence, they'd probably do better
Yeah.
if they didn't, but they do. So let's just be honest, right? And alcohol is another one that's on a continuum, which we can touch on here in a sec.
Sure, yeah.
And so they all eat, like I said, beans is one they eat. Again, that was a paleo thing. Don't eat beans because they have lectins, and lectins are anti-nutrients, and they cause all
Mhm.
these problems. Well, all these people eat beans, and they're doing quite fine.
Beans are good. I
And
like
beans are good, and
beans.
they're cheap, by
They're
the way. If you're
cheap.
trying to save money, if you look at food inflation and stuff like that,
Mhm.
like beans, oats, these are really cheap foods. So telling
Mhm.
people to eat the really expensive stuff only is like, well,
That's
just, yeah,
yeah.
who's paying?
Exactly.
It's expensive. So that's some of the commonalities, just between those groups. So we can look at that, and this is like Okinawa, Japan, as an example. And
Yep.
the big thing, by the way, for all of them, carbs is the primary macronutrient they consume. That's where
Mm.
most of their calories come from.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
again, that's kind of a knock against that. But that doesn't mean there's not an area that would have people that just consume less carbs. And I'm certain they could be perfectly healthy. So I just want to make that very clear. I'm pointing that out because that's what's really popular, more popular right now,
Yep.
as an example. But yeah, and alcohol was another one, I
Do you
think.
drink?
Very rarely. I drink less as I've gotten older. I used to drink more than I do now. I like red wine sometimes. I've been in Napa
Okay.
Valley a couple times, which is a really cool place. When I first went there, I was like, I'm not going to like this. I like beer. Um, what a place, though. And especially I have kids and stuff now. When I went there were no kids around. It was kind of
Yeah.
cool. Like, I love my kids. Don't get me wrong. It's sometimes you want to go to Disney World, sometimes you want to go to Napa. But yeah, so alcohol is really interesting. And I do this in a presentation because I have a friend who opened a non-alcoholic brewery. It's
Yeah.
called Go Brewing, right? And it's
Mhm.
great. And you would
It is
not believe
great.
how good the beer is. Like,
Check it out.
I
Mhm.
would tell what I tell people a lot of stuff. It's like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and it's in the summer. You're
Mhm.
sitting on the porch and you just want to
Mhm.
drink. The NA beers are great. Like, you feel good, but alcohol is pervasive because you can have a very small amount of it, and it can negatively impact your sleep. Even like one drink, where you're just not going to sleep as well, and then that's going to affect your appetite the next day. You're probably going to be hungrier or things like that. It's going to affect your performance, all that. So I try to get people to the point with alcohol where you just kind of say to yourself, hey, do I really need this random drink on a Wednesday night? Am
Hmm.
I consuming alcohol because I need to relax before bed or unwind? I would say maybe I try to get them into a more virtuous cycle, or maybe you wake up in the morning and you work out, and that's where you're kind of getting that dopamine hit from and you're feeling good.
Mm,
And then you want to get to bed in time and sleep well because you want to repeat that behavior.
yeah.
Like that's like a good one. And then maybe Friday, Saturday night, you want a little wine or some beer with dinner. You can make that work. But the true right amount of alcohol is none. The research that shows where moderate alcohol consumption, social drinking is actually healthier than non-drinkers.
Okay. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
flawed because if we have like three groups, let's say we have heavy drinkers,
Hmm.
social drinkers, and non-drinkers, okay, we can eliminate the heavy drinkers right away. We know cirrhosis, all these problems that they can have, right? Everyone would pretty much agree, okay, heavy
Hmm.
drinking, binge drinking, not good. But if we have true social drinkers, right, you know, and I forgot the exact definition off the top of my head, but it's fairly high to be honest with you. It's like 3 to 5 drinks or something like that, or
Hmm.
for males and 2 for females, something like that. But let's just say we have that definition of social drinkers. You'd hear on the news or something like that, right? That moderate alcoholic consumption is better for you than non-drinkers, right? They'll outperform
Yeah.
them, right? You'll hear stuff like that,
I
like
have. Yeah.
little wine is good for you, stuff like that, right? And it's
Hmm.
not there's not some stuff in wine that's like resveratrol and stuff could be good for you, but
Yep.
bottom line is the problem with that is we had what's called the sick quitters problem, right? The heavy drinkers are categorized with the non-drinkers because they drank so damn much that they can't drink
Mm,
anymore. So
okay.
they would bring down the non-drinkers'
Okay.
health markers. So
Yeah.
that would be one.
Hmm.
Two, some non-drinkers are non-drinkers because of other health problems. Maybe you have cancer. They're on other medications that doesn't allow them to drink. Now, if we tease those people out of the data, what ends up happening is the non-drinkers are the healthiest, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you're too sick at baseline to even consume alcohol,
Yeah.
and we're putting you with non-drinkers, that's going to make non-drinkers look worse.
Yeah.
So that's
I think people are catching on to that too. You know what I mean? Like I've never really drank. Maybe I'm just lame or whatever. But even like in college or in grad school, it was never my thing. But I
sure,
just didn't like the taste of it,
sure.
honestly. But never been
Well, the
drunk.
worst shit happens when people are drunk, to be honest with you. Let's be,
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know what I mean? We all see these crazy, these sad
Right.
stories, you know, the drinking and driving and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the poor hockey players, Gaudreau's, right? They just
And
got
that's the
killed.
stuff I would hear is like, people getting drunk and do some stupid stuff.
And
And
the
it's like,
person hopefully feels terrible who did it. So it ruins all
yeah.
those lives.
And
And
I'm just
it's
like,
like,
nah, I'm good. You know what I
yeah,
mean? I have fun other ways, I
you're
like
better
food,
off. You're better off,
talking to
honestly.
people, it's all good.
Absolutely.
But
It's so ingrained in our culture, though. It's hard to, so
it
like
is.
as
Yeah.
me, if I'm trying to change people's habits, I don't come to them and say, cold turkey, don't drink. Ah.
You know what's funny is I never really gotten anybody to try to like, I don't know, try to goat me or belittle me into drink. You know what I mean? Like
I
even when
would
I'm
say
on
for
a
a lot of
social,
people who do drink, though, peer pressure is one of the biggest things I hear from people.
but
It's
like when I say like, no, I'm good. Like I don't drink. Nobody really like says it to me at least. I've
yeah.
never gotten that. I don't know, but
Well, you're confident in it, and maybe they don't. If there are people who you
maybe,
know
but
and they don't associate you with, but imagine you were Frank the Tank in college, and you're with your buddies, or whatever, and you're a damn good time, or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're with your neighbors. These are the things I hear from clients, right? So
Oh, I
I'm
see.
out with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
neighbors, they're drinking, I don't, you drink too, and a lot of them don't even mean something bad by it, but the peer pressure is even with adults, honestly. It's really strong, or they'll feel like I need something in my hand or something like that. That's where the
Yeah,
NA stuff is
yeah,
really good and really helpful because now they
yeah,
get to have that opportunity to do that, right?
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've felt it even too with the peer pressure and stuff. Look, I've had good times in my past
Oh, I'm
drinking. It
sure.
was
Yeah.
fun, great stories. But at
You
the
want to share
same,
one of those?
no,
Or
no, no. But that's so it's hard, and that's why though, if I'm trying to get people to change, I'm not gonna just be an absolutist, and also
Right,
I don't
for
want to
sure.
come off like I'm on the high horse or anything
Right,
either.
me neither.
Because
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
and I'm not saying you do, but
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean. If I'm coaching somebody, I'll just be like, let's try and peel that down. Like I'll calculate the percentage of alcohol that they were in their calories, and I'll just start putting it in their
Yeah.
notes that I send them.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit. I say, babe, try and get that under 20% on that day, or try and lower
Yeah.
it here and there, because that's really going to help you and stuff like that. And then over time, they'll always do better if they come to that conclusion on their own versus you just telling them, oh, you shouldn't drive, wow, you shouldn't do this or that. It's like, okay, I'll just say, here's what the evidence shows,
Yeah.
and it is true, like it's the same level carcinogenous as cigarettes. People don't think of alcohol that way,
Oh,
but it
okay.
causes cancer at the same rate.
Yeah.
Not lung cancer particularly, but other types of cancer. I think like throat cancer is one of them, other type things, right? I don't know, stomach cancer, I think is another one. And it's the
Mm,
biggest killer of like adults under the age of 39, like
yeah, that
by
makes
far,
sense.
right? Just
Yeah.
it just is.
Yeah.
But so you can over time kind of introduce this data and statistics, and a lot of people kind of know better, right? But it's again, it's so in the
It's
culture, like it's
hard,
in music,
yeah.
it's everywhere. So
But
it's something
yeah.
that takes time, and it's a process for people to change. Habit change takes
Yeah.
time. It just does.
Usually I've gotten, like I said, the opposite response when, in a social setting. I'm like, yeah, I don't drink, or I have like a water in my hand or something.
Sure.
Usually people are like, oh, cool. I remember when I used to tell people that when I was younger, I was like, oh, what are they gonna think if I say
Sure.
I don't drink? You know
Sure.
what I mean? Most of the time, it's the opposite response, which is funny. I'm not saying don't drink as well. It's fine to drink a little bit, but you know,
Yeah, if you like really like red wine or like good
right.
beer, yeah, have it.
It's
It's
it's just
just
funny. In my personal experience, I've gotten the opposite response where it's like, "Oh, cool, you don't drink?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't drink. I just have a club soda in my hand, a water." Nobody even notices half the time, which is
yeah,
funny. If you're out somewhere, you know what I
sure.
mean? Like they're all drinking. No, they don't even care. You know what I mean? So
For
don't be
sure.
afraid to not drink either.
Yeah,
But
I just think it's a continuum. It's
yeah,
it's the dose that makes the poison with anything,
exactly.
right? That's the big thing, Like again, another one, like if somebody comes to me and they're drinking 6 cans of Coke or Pepsi a day, right? So there's
Mm,
a carb one, right? That could be
hmm
problematic for people. If I tell them you can't have any soda ever, it's probably not going to go well. But I'll try and say, hey, why don't you have Coke Zero? Why don't you have some of this? Be like, oh, I got artificial sweeteners. It's like, okay, look, we have a ton of evidence with non-nutritive
Should we dive
sweeteners.
into that?
Well, yeah, I'll just tell you, like
Sweeteners?
we have a lot of evidence with those, right?
Hmm
And I've gotten the emails too from the crazy uncle too, who by the way smokes and drinks, which is always funny. And look, I haven't been to a funeral from somebody who OD'd on sucralose. I mean, give me a break, right? Yeah, what happened to Jimmy? Too much Splenda. Like, come on, seriously. So it's these things are like 100 times sweeter than sugar. A lot of
hmm
them. If for aspartame, for instance, if you are somebody that gets they're called idiopathic headaches. We don't know the cause, but some people get headaches from aspartame. Don't consume aspartame. Don't do
hmm
it. But if the difference between me getting somebody to drink not 6 Cokes and having 6 Coke Zeros, that's going to make a big difference. We can reverse
hmm
type 2 on
hmm
adult onset
hmm
diabetes. We can get them losing weight. It's much better. And then people say, oh, it affects the gut microbiome. That's all been done on petri dishes. That's really hard to study the gut microbiome. So, and you're doing such a small amount that you could actually offset that with like better dieting. Because
Yeah.
what's going to dictate your gut microbiome is the foods that you consume. So what I tell people is you crave what you eat. So if you eat a lot of fruit, vegetables, lean proteins, oats, things like that, raw nuts, stuff like that, you're probably going to crave more of that. If you eat a lot of fast food, you're going to crave a lot of it. And you'll be able to eat it and probably not have any GI distress. If you don't eat a lot of fast food and then you go eat it, you probably don't feel very good because your gut microbiome really doesn't have the capacity to deal with
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to exaggerate that research because it's very hard to study that stuff. But we do know there's the gut brain axis. It affects what you consume. It affects you that way. But so that would be kind of the pushback you'll get with artificial sweeteners. I think a lot of people have backed off the whole it's going to cause cancer and all that kind of stuff because there's just
Okay.
not the evidence there to support that.
Yeah.
And you can't do studies, by the way, with humans giving them supraphysiological doses of artificial sweeteners. So we have to rely on rodent studies for that
Yep.
because you would never pass an ethics board for that kind of study. It's
No.
the same reason we don't have a bunch of evidence for when a woman is pregnant, what they can and can't eat or consume. You'll get a lot of general advice because you can't study that.
Right.
You're not gonna sign up women and use them as a lab rats, if you will, when they're pregnant. With like tuna, you'll hear like only have so much tuna because of the mercury and stuff like
Yep.
that for pregnant women and stuff. Like
hmm
it's not based on some randomized control trial. We just can't do that study.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of gleaning that.
That
So
makes sense. Yeah. Uh, Back to longevity stuff. What else have you heard around, I guess, that area that people are kind of like grabbing onto in terms of longevity? It's a big topic I see on
strength training
YouTube.
is becoming
Strength
more, which
training.
is
Yep.
great.
Of
Like you and
course.
I have known that for a long
Right.
time, right?
Right.
But
Right. Right.
I'm seeing it more in the late press. So I'm really happy to see that. That's a
hmm
positive. Where
hmm
just a lot of the podcasters and stuff are talking about it because it's great.
Yep.
And cardio is good too, by the way, because I think the strength training community, kind of the inside of it, was kind of anti cardio for a long time too.
Yep.
Because it was always just hypertrophy, hypertrophy. This and that. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, well. Yeah, some cardio is good too. Good mix, right?
Yes.
Like for me, like being a jiu-jitsu practitioner, or if you watch like MMA and stuff like that, right? You need to be strong, you need to be explosive, you need to be as fast as you can be, and you better have endurance.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing scarier than no endurance and somebody trying to kick your
The
ass.
second you're fatigued, you're screwed
You see it
essentially.
with certain
Yep.
fighters. You see when they break. It's when their cardio
Yep.
goes.
And they could be the most talented fighter in the world, but if the second they get tired, they're getting choked out or knocked out. So.
100%. And some of it's just, doing technique inefficiently. There's some of
hmm
that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got to have cardio as well too from that standpoint. But also I'd say from a longevity standpoint. And some of that could be just baseline. There's evidence that just being in zone one can really enhance you aerobically
Yeah.
too, right? Just
Yeah.
going for long walks with your dog and stuff like
Right.
that. And then you do your strength training, which taxes your aerobic base. So you could do some of that, but it doesn't mean like, oh, if you like to run 5Ks and stuff, oh, I'm going to lose all my muscle and stuff. It's like, no, you can do some of that
Yeah.
stuff, right? If you're a bodybuilder, yeah, probably you're not, but that's like the extreme, right?
Yep.
Like that's just a different thing. But if your goal is like overall fitness, functional training, health, and I know that's a loaded term, you know, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, even say that people will.
People
Yeah,
conjure up a lot of ideas of
yeah.
what that is. They think, oh, somebody, balancing on a Bosu ball and trying to do a single leg squat. That's not functional training. To me, like functional is like, okay, more unilateral work on the lower body than say bilateral work, right? Because you're generally injured when your feet are separated from each other and you do most of your work in your sports or just day-to-day life with your feet apart from each other. And I could, for instance, have somebody do a single leg squat down to like a plyo box and get a ton of force on one leg without ever loading them.
Yeah.
Right. Now
Yep.
they have to have triplanar hip control, like all that kind of stuff. Right. So there's a lot of benefit there too from like day-to-day life. And then just purely, I could tell you from the martial arts world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and how you have to use your body and stuff like that. I cannot tell you the difference between the guy that could deadlift 500 pounds and the guy that deadlifts 300 pounds. Once you reach a certain level of strength, it doesn't matter. It really
That's a
doesn't
great
matter. It's
point.
not that strength does it's not that being stronger isn't good. You should generally want to be stronger, but what's the trade-off? Like
Yep.
I can carry more weight than I currently carry, but then I'm trading off my endurance. And I need to find that kind of sweet spot between the two, which, oh, by the way, I think is generally better for longevity, kind of the weave. Yeah, we get the weave come back. So,
Yep.
so weaving that back to that,
Should have
that's
called this podcast the Weave podcast.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you know where that comes from?
I do. I think everybody knows now. It's all over the
If you
place.
saw
Now,
it,
but yeah.
it's hilarious.
Anyways, we're gonna weave through nutrition, training, rehab stuff because I want to talk about if you
Sure.
care to share surgical stuff that you've gone through.
Yeah. I had a high tibial osteotomy just in May.
Yeah.
So what that surgery is, I know of like two other people have had. Another guy I know from Jiu-Jitsu had it, and then David Goggins, he wrote about it in his second book. There's a lot of pain from it. So basically, I had a meniscus tear over 15 years ago doing Muay Thai, and I tore the meniscus really bad. It was a bucket handle tear, and they just couldn't repair it, right?
Yep.
So like something like 80% of the meniscus came out, and probably whatever's left in there now is just frayed. So just over time, my joint space started to close. And you could speak to this, but there's a myth that like running will accelerate that, but that's to my not really true, right?
Yeah.
It's more. It's just going to happen, right, from time. So, like, don't baby it. If you have it, just get the soft tissue strong. And I think that's what helped me survive longer, honestly, without the problem. It was just all the work. Because the day of surgery, I was doing rear foot elevated split squats or Bulgarian split squats. And I told the doc leading into it, Dr. Brian Cole at Midwest Ortho, who's one of the best in the world at this particular surgery. But my bones were basically rubbing together, my femur and my tibia. And then your options become, you could do what's called like a partial or unicompartmental replacement, where now you're getting into plastic and all that stuff in there. But if you want to remain really active, I'm too young for that and I'm too active. You have this option of what's called a high tibial osteotomy. As I understand it, they were doing in Europe a long time ago, and they've kind of made their way to be more common here in the States.
Okay. Yeah.
That I did a lot of reading on it when I found it happen.
Yeah.
But basically, they sawed my tibia in half, and they wedge it open, and they put a bone graft in there, and then plate and screws, and then I paid out of pocket for some bone marrow to help with the, because the insurance won't cover it, but I had the bone marrow in there as well to kind of help the healing process.
Nice.
The plate and screws are right in here. The recovery I've been through, that's my 4th ever knee surgery. I've never torn a ligament, only meniscus. So, but that particular surgery was very painful. The recovery was, it was a something.
Okay. Seems to be a theme here. Like, my last guest also had meniscal stuff. So it's,
I think
we're going to keep having these people with meniscus surgery.
It's really common, right? But so what I can tell you now, though, is just coming off the surgery, the first 6 weeks were really hard. Like you're non-weight bearing for 6 weeks, basically couldn't walk for 2 months.
Yeah.
Had to then move to one crutch. But then I just attacked the rehab big time.
Yep.
And ended up as soon as I could,
Once you get the green light, you could start. Yep.
My Echo bike was a lifesaver. That really helped me a lot. When I couldn't use my legs, I just used my arms. I did a lot of hollow body holds. I would do on my pull-up bar like flexed arm hangs.
Yep.
It would work my core and cross. So I would do, and I would constantly pump my quad and my calf.
Yep.
Even when it hurt, because I ended up with a blood clot too. But I always did it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you told me.
Yes, but I never needed stim, and that really helped me quite a bit and really kept me ahead of this game.
Okay.
So yeah.
How is it now?
It's the knee itself does not hurt at all. I have no pain in the joint, and that's been a couple of years since I've had no pain there.
Okay.
But the lower part is still, the nerves are still coming back.
Oh yeah.
I just started doing a little bit of jiu-jitsu, nothing too
Okay,
crazy.
I was gonna ask about that. Yeah. All right.
I can't run, not yet. If I was being chased by Michael Myers on Halloween recently, I try and choke him, to be real, but I couldn't run anyway. Even if I wanted to, so kind of like the high impact stuff I can't do, but I can lift. Like I'm back. I could do split squats.
Okay.
I'm lunging. I'm doing all of that. I'm not quite up to the 100% of the weight I was before, but I'm getting pretty close. I'm like 90% there.
Okay.
But it's just the high impact, kind of any like weight bearing, dynamic movement on the leg. Like if you told me to like skip or
Hmm.
something, I would
That's what I was gonna
probably have
ask. Like,
trouble.
are you up to that point
No,
yet? No.
no,
Okay.
not yet. Not yet. I think the nerves are still coming back. Like if I'm on my
Okay.
feet for a while, if I walk the dog, I could feel it a little bit. I've been using my neighbor had an extra set of the Normatec, the
Oh yeah,
compressions.
yeah, yeah,
I don't know if they help or not, but they sure
yeah. They
feel good
feel
after.
good.
It does feel
That's what
good.
I tell
So
people all the time. It feels good. Again, research on those things are always, back and forth. Oh, it's great. Oh, it's not great. Oh, sauna this, cold plunge that. Most of the time, if it feels good, it's gonna make you feel good. Your stress is gonna go down. Pain's gonna decrease. Just do it. It's fine. You know what I mean? Don't overthink it, as I always tell everybody. So you're not back to skipping or like high impact stuff, right?
no, I would say foam rolling has helped too.
Okay.
It feels good. And
Yeah.
then jujitsu is nice too, because just to kind of get used to kind of getting
Yeah.
feeling it there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like one of the benefits I think of jujitsu and other kind of martial arts like Muay Thai things is your bone density.
Yes.
It really improves it and stuff like that. But then just your sensitivity. Like,
Yeah. It,
if
it
somebody's
takes a while.
never done jujitsu and somebody like pushes your legs like femoral artery and stuff, you're not used to that. People are like,
Yeah.
oh, I could really feel like I don't even feel that anymore. It's been so
Yeah.
many
It's just
years,
numb. Yeah.
just not used, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. I mean, usually from a rehab standpoint, physical therapy standpoint, we want to hit certain milestones before you can start doing higher impact stuff.
Yeah.
So thankfully, your strength is almost 100%, you said?
Almost, yeah, I'd say for sure.
Once that's there, I would say start doing some, like I said, skips, some double leg jumps, and then progress to single leg jumps, and then kind of go from there. And then, once you hit certain milestones with single leg hopping, try running. Again,
Nice.
it's to the discretion of
Sure.
hopefully your physical therapist, but
Yeah.
um, or whoever's helping you with that.
Well, I'm past that point, so you're going to be my guy
Okay.
when it comes to that. I did that just initially to get moving, and I just did it through the surgeon and stuff like that. And a lot
Yeah.
of that, they really helped me with like
Hmm.
range of motion, getting me locked out. And then once it got to a point where, okay, this is now a strength thing, like get stronger and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, definitely I would lean into like your expertise. Like, hey, when do you think it's
When was the last time
okay?
you ran?
Uh,
I mean,
I stopped running. I stopped running probably like November, October of last year, so a year. Because then leading up, that's when I just realized I need to get this taken care of.
yeah.
And then I ended up doing it in May,
Okay.
so it's been a
Yeah.
long time. And I would run fairly often, nothing crazy, just 5Ks of it. I mean, I've done half marathons, I've done all that stuff, but just generally, just enjoy it because it gets me outside and stuff like that. So there's a freedom to running that's very enjoyable.
Yeah. Um, with running, I mean, a lot of times in rehab, I see, especially knee injuries. I guess any injury really, you could apply it to whatever rehab situation. But I see it with soccer players, basketball players, getting back to hopping and running. The mental game will play
You,
tricks on you.
you're right.
So, how do you feel about getting back into running? Like, do you feel strong enough to start hopping?
Yeah,
You know what
great
I mean?
question. Yeah, I just feel like for me, probably because I've been through that with the other knee surgeries,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Great
Yeah. I'm
point.
sure you
Where
felt that.
where
Yeah.
like going back to jujitsu after like the
Mhm.
one meniscus I had repaired, and as you know, if
Yep.
it's just resected, you're back right away. It's not really a big gap in activity, but the repair I
Yep.
had in the
Yep.
right knee,
Hmm.
like you're basically on the same track as like an ACL almost, right? In
Yeah.
terms
Oh
of
yeah.
time,
Uh
right?
huh.
So I had to baby it. I was in a brace and stuff. That took me some time to get used to that, for sure. I've got almost full range of motion. I can almost, full knee flexion, full extension. Um, but like I can't quite put my butt all the way back on my heels, like with pressure,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm close though. I'm really close. I've
Okay.
gotten close.
Yeah.
Um, but I agree. I think you're right about that. I would say right now it's just I could feel the nerves still kind of waking because when they saw that bone, man, I think that that
It
that
might take a while
kills those
too,
nerves. Yeah, and nerves take a long time to
It
regenerate, right?
could take a year or two, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I'm always going to advocate for physical therapy here, but, especially with people being fearful of certain movements, the cool thing about us as PTs, we could kind of do that in a controlled environment for the patient to build confidence to then transition into a more open setting like jujitsu, running outside or whatever. We'll try it in the clinic first. You build confidence. The mental game kind of like doesn't play as much tricks on you anymore, and then you can start doing that out in a more a non-controlled environment. Essentially, does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Makes perfect sense. My fear would be my gait would be off and I would compensate and hurt my
Right,
other
and
leg
that's
right
why
now.
I would watch you creepily like a hawk.
I
How
would
you're
trust,
walking.
yeah.
You know what I
I
mean?
would feel confident knowing that
Yes.
you're watching and stuff. And I don't you'd put me in a harness or whatever
Yeah, I
that would
watch you
be.
run on the treadmill, jump, everything. And if I see something a little off or a little weird, your mechanics are kind of strange, we'll fix it there. And then in order for you to transition safely in an open environment. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So apparently we have 5 minutes left, but that went by super fast.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Cool.
um, any last nutrition advice you would throw out there for somebody?
Yeah, I mean, just generally speaking, adopt a more flexible approach, and just try to eat more nutrient dense foods, right?
Okay.
That would be generally what I would say. But don't be dogmatic about I can't have this, I can't have that ever. Like if you have like a favorite, oh, I love key lime pie, like
I do.
yeah, yeah, I guess okay, have it
I love
sometimes.
everything.
It's how much you have, and also too like a just a quick anecdotal one would be redefine the meaning of full. Full isn't I can't eat anymore.
Okay.
Roughly 80% full. That takes time to get used to. You kind of got to readapt to that. Stop, wait 10 minutes, drink water. It seems like really basic advice, but it's really good advice. And before you know it, you could eat and not feel like, oh, I could actually do something. So the joke I make with people is if you were a caveman and you just ate and a bear came in to attack you and you can't run away because you ate too much, you ate too much. But if you just ate and the bear came in and you had to run, depending on
Yeah.
the kind of bear, you didn't overeat if you can run away, right?
Mm,
That's kind of where you want to be. Kind of redefine that meaning of full. You should not need a nap after you eat every time. Thanksgiving, fair enough. Do
okay.
it up, but
Yeah.
yeah.
What stuff do you have going on in the future, John? I know you guys are opening up a new gym.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, so over in Naperville, we're opening up. It's gonna be called Go Hybrid Fitness. We had another name, but there was a trademark thing. But anyway, so yeah, we're gonna offer small group strength training.
Cool.
So the people will get kind of the benefit of almost like personal training, but in a group, so it's much cheaper.
Yep.
And it's along the philosophy, me being CFSC, so it'll
Yep.
be a lot of single leg work, a lot of loaded carries, things like
Okay.
that. We're gonna try and get people strong, but also every exercise we have a baseline, we have progressions, regressions. We'll take them through a program. So all the classes will have a form to them where you foam roll, you do some movement prep, we do some power work. When I say power, I don't mean necessarily Olympic lifts. I mean like med ball throws, things like
Yep.
that, because we need that nervous system turn on, turn off. We need that. That's really really important, especially if you're aging too. But if you sent your grandma in, I would have her throw a med ball.
Yeah.
Maybe not be a heavy one.
Yeah.
She's throwing it because we
Yeah.
need that. You need to use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. It's true.
Hmm.
And then we go into strength training, 30 minutes roughly, full body. And then from there, like 10 minutes of conditioning. We have people on the My Zone screens and stuff like that. So we
Oh,
make sure we're
cool.
not torturing people,
Yeah.
unless that's what we're trying to do. But no,
Yes.
it's not a meat grinder approach. It's not one size fits all. Like some people, certain movements they shouldn't be doing, and we will regress or progress them based on
Cool.
what they're doing. And then we're going to also offer striking classes from professional fighters, like how to
Yeah.
really strike and stuff like that. We're going to take you right up to where the line of sparring is. You're not going to
Mm,
full spar, but you'll do
yeah.
partner drills where you'll hold up your gloves.
Okay.
So you get used to punches coming towards you so you don't turn away, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, I would say like within 6 months of that kind of training, if somebody wanted to throw hands with you, you'd probably be perfectly fine. Not that we're encouraging that. That's the last thing you should want. People always ask, oh, you're a black belt, you start. I'm the best guy to start a fight with because I'm probably not going to fight you. I'm going to walk away, walk away, walk away. And if it comes down to it, we're going to take you down, control you, not hurt you. If you're trying to calm people down, elbowing them in the face is the least effective way.
Yeah. That makes sense. So you got when's like timeline for that one?
Yeah,
When we
hopefully
guys
end of
have that
November.
open?
We're gonna have a soft opening. So, by January for sure, we'll be taking on full members and stuff like that. But it's gonna be a really fun, great environment. We're gonna do functional movement screens. We're gonna have a lot of testing. We're gonna have some standard fitness tests. We're gonna do like, hey, mile and a half on the air bike. Let's see where you are
That's
now.
cool. Yeah.
I have one that I really is near and dear to me. It's
Okay.
gonna be a badge based one. If you can like 50% goblet hold half your body weight, 40% for females, and do
Hmm.
25 reps of a rear foot elevated split squat.
Oh,
So a
okay.
Bulgarian split squat. So imagine 50% goblet hold, 25 each leg. You're
Nice.
gonna get a special badge because I've done that and
Ooh.
it's hard.
Okay. I'll have to go try that
Yeah,
myself.
yeah.
But
It's right. Yeah. Text me how you feel after that one.
Where's it opening at? Is it by you guys
Yeah,
at
so it's gonna be
the?
in Naperville off Quincy Avenue, 1661 Quincy Avenue, behind Go Brewing, actually. So
Okay.
it's gonna be called Go Hybrid Fitness because Joe from Go Brewing is one of our
Hmm.
partners in it.
Hmm.
So we've got some really good people that are helping do it, and yeah, it's gonna be great training as tailored as we can make it for people, and just like I said, a really great environment is what we're going for too.
Okay. You want to plug everything else you got?
Yeah,
Website,
I'm
the gym.
Nutrition361, nutrition361.com. So if you want like a consultation with me, fill out my form. I will definitely talk to you. I always tell people it's really not a sales call, and that sounds like total bullshit, but it's true because it'll only work if you think I can help you and vice versa. If you're like, hey, I need a
Yeah.
quick fix, I'm probably not the guy to help you, and I'll be honest with you. We have to work together. I'm not a product you can
Yep.
return. So that's on nutrition361.com. That's the best way to reach me. Just fill out that form.
Okay.
And then if you want to learn jiu-jitsu, I teach out at the BJJ lab in
It's a
Naperville.
great gym, by the way.
Yeah, we've got great environment there too. So if you're
Super
interested
cool.
in learning some jiu-jitsu, it's a great sport, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
I
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. If you guys have any questions for John, just hit him up on his website. Do you have an Instagram?
I do, but I'm really bad at
You
social
really?
media.
Okay.
Yeah, it's at
Well,
nutrition361. I've been the guy where there's a message. It's like a month later. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't. I don't even know. Like I don't have notifications.
You
Uh,
should go back on there a little bit.
yeah, I have to be better about that for sure. So I'll try my best. It's one
Yeah.
of those things for me. But yeah,
Yeah.
for
Well,
sure.
if you guys have any back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain, you could DM me on Instagram at APT You could just, send me a message. I'll get back to you relatively quickly. And yeah, thanks again, John.
Thank
That
you for
was
having me.
that was
I
awesome,
appreciate
man. I
it.
appreciate it. Have
Awesome.
you on again, hopefully? That'd
Yeah,
be
for sure.
awesome.
Yeah, we can talk about something else for sure.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that blend nutrition and physical
Yeah,
therapy.
for sure.
Everything is, like I always say, bleeds into each other. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.